South Africa's new minimum wage of 21.69 for each ordinary hour worked has come into effect. Some of the sector-specific changes include farm workers. Domestic workers are entitled to a minimum wage of 19.09 per hour, and workers employed in the expanded public works program are entitled to a minimum wage of 11.93 per hour. We're joined now via Skype by the chairperson of the South African Domestic Workers Forum, Lindiwe Shibambo. Also we have on the line is Lebogang Sethusa. She is a Labour and Development Administrator at AgriSA to weigh in on the minimum wage. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you for having us.
That's a great pleasure. It's, we need to explore this in terms of what this means on the ground. Lindiwe, if I can start with you, with regards to a daily rate for domestic workers and a monthly rate for, let's say, 20 working days, what does that work out to?
I think your increment of 21.69 from us as the South African Domestic Workers Forum seems very reasonable. And if you take into account the then cost of living now, it becomes very unfair to domestic workers. So the minimum that has been set currently is sitting at 152.70 for a rate, and the monthly rate for someone who works for 20 days has been set at 3,054 rands, which is very, very unreasonable. I mean, you're looking at someone who is traveling, someone who has kids, someone who's got responsibilities.
Just help me understand this. I just need some clarification with regards to this 19.09 rand per hour.
Nice.
Help us understand that. How does that fit into the equation?
You know what? This is a rate that has been speculated for, just to give sort of guideline to employers when they do calculations of salaries. And of course, there has to be something that is legislated in regards to the employment of domestic workers. So there has to be a referral point when someone appoints a domestic worker. But in reality, obviously, there is no domestic worker that can work just for 1 hour. So obviously, you're looking at someone working normal 8 hours. So how the rate works, it's just a guideline to say, as an employer, this is the minimum rate per hour you can give your domestic worker or your home employee.
All right, important clarification there. Lebogang, talk to us about farm workers and the impact this will have on their lives.
With regards to the impact of farm workers, it will have a great impact. The increase will have a great impact on their lives with regards to, because it's an increase from 3,362.40 from 2020 to now the 3,904.20 in 2021. The issue we're having with regards to the minimum wage is with regards to the impact it will have on the farm workers, the farmers itself, because we want to balance how, on one hand, having a minimum wage that is feasible and that gives having the minds of the families of the farm workers in mind, and on the one hand having keeping farmers viable and financially viable, because the industry consists mostly of small to medium farmers, as well having an impact of the commercial farmers as well. So we want to have those two balances, having a minimum wage that keeps in mind the families of the farm workers, but also keeping the farm financially viable to employ and retain those workers in employment.
Does your organization have any measures in place in order to monitor that this is actually happening in terms of farm workers getting paid what they do? What sort of recourse do they have via your organization?
In terms of our organization, we usually are a policy and advising an organization. So we do advise in if there is non-compliance with the national minimum wage, to lodge a complaint with the Department of Labor, to lodge a complaint also with the CCMA. We also have a good relationship as an organization with the CCMA to assist when it comes to mediation and conciliations with regards to tending farms, because most of them, when it comes to farm workers, are in the rural communities. So we have that good relationship with the CCMA to attend the farms if they don't have the funds to come to lodge a complaint, and then assist in that way as well.
Lindiwe, the pain of the pandemic is all too apparent, isn't it? It's all too real. When you look at the numbers this morning, we woke up to numbers of 50,000 people have lost their lives due to COVID-19 related illness. Lives and livelihoods have been affected. Talk to us about how domestic workers have been affected during this pandemic.
I must say, domestic workers have been immensely impacted by COVID-19. Not only have most of them lost their loved ones due to the conditions that they are living in on a day-to-day basis, but also you're looking at majority of domestic workers that have lost their jobs. We have been dealing with cases of domestic workers from last year that wanted to claim their UIFs due to COVID, and only to find that they were not even registered. So it has had a very negative impact on the domestic workers. There is loss of life, there is loss of jobs, there is, I think the first thing that happens to any household when they themselves get retrenched or the economic meltdown happens, the first cut they would make is that they would suggest, or they would opt to retrench the domestic worker. Now, the unfortunate part about that is that you find that this particular domestic worker has worked in that particular household 5, 10, 20 years, but has not been registered. There is no provident fund in place. There is nothing. There is no fallback or any kind of support for that particular domestic worker. And as much as we are seeing in the news the negative impact of COVID-19, we are not seeing anything that is coming across that is directly linked to domestic workers as a support structure.
As an organization, though, are you thinking ahead in terms of what can be put in place in order to cushion domestic workers? Because, look, we don't know what the future holds. There's so many unknowns with regards to COVID-19. A measure of solace is that we're getting these vaccines rolled out. But what's your long-term plan with regards to how to deal with the pandemic?
Absolutely, we're in support of the vaccination, because majority of domestic workers do commute, so they do travel every day and they get exposed to a lot of people. So we do support the rollout of the vaccination, and we do encourage domestic workers to step forth. Secondly, going forward, one of the major things that we need to look at is to how do we make sure, together with government departments like Department of Employment and Labor, how do we make sure that we monitor and ensure that compliance is adhered to by employers. We need to come together as stakeholders to ensure that the domestic workers are indeed registered for UIF.
Yeah.
We definitely welcomed the move by government to include domestic workers on the compensation and injury fund. So now at least there is legislature that says domestic workers indeed can now claim from COIDA. Of course, we are waiting for directive from government to say what is the criteria. But as much as the COIDA has been implemented, there is a need for things like provident fund, medical aid. How do we make sure that our home employees are well covered, well taken care of, whilst working in our household and in future?
Lebogang, no doubt you are testing the temperature of views on the ground with regards to farmers and farm workers. Are they eager to get vaccinated?
Yes, indeed, they are eager to get vaccinated because the unique thing about the agricultural sector as well is that we have farmers who have clinics on site already that can assist with to vaccination, availing their facilities for vaccinations. So in that sense, that's what's unique about the industry and indeed shows our willingness with regards to the vaccination.
So, just help us, Lebogang, with regards to the breakdown of the national minimum wage, with regards to the payable amount for ordinary hours worked. Does it include payments of allowances and transport, tools, etc.? What's your understanding with regards to that?
A lot of our farmers advise that they do give transport allowance, they do give housing allowance, they do medical assistance allowance on top of the national minimum wage that they are offering to their farm workers.
And Lindiwe, with regards to this figure of 19 Rand and 9 cents per hour, when do you expect it to be aligned with regards to the new minimum wage?
Of course, I mean, we have to be realistic that from the inception of the minimum wage has never favored domestic workers. When the minimum wage was introduced, the domestic workers' rate was way below the minimum wage. An issue that I believe that the South African Domestic Workers Union, SABC, has tried to take up to say, this is not favorable to domestic workers. And you look at now the minimum wage of 1909, it's still below the national minimum wage. So we are very hopeful that by 2022, the minimum wage of domestic workers will be at par with the national minimum wage.
All right, Lindiwe Shibambo and Lebogang Sethusa, we thank you very much indeed, ladies, for your time and your perspective. Be well.
Thank you for having us.
All right, there you go. So that was Lindiwe Shibambo from the South African Domestic Workers Forum and the Labour and Development Administrator at AgriSA, Lebogang Sethusa there. We're going to take a quick break.